So, this is going to be probably one of the more important videos I ever make. I'd been intending to do it for a while, but I kind of sped up the schedule because a friend of mine sort of indirectly requested it. So, that being said, let's kind of go into this. So, I think something that people find who don't suffer from a mental illness find extremely hard to understand is that, especially if you have a severe one, you're in a perpetual state of identity crisis. That is, you can't quite pin down who you are, what you want, why you're here, where you're going, to use Babylon 5 parlance. I think when a lot of people think about, I don't know, anxiety disorder, or depression, or something like that, they think about it in terms of you're you. You just kind of have this underlying personality, and it's just you being happy or you being sad. What I don't think people understand is you undergo complete personality change, almost to being a completely different person, particularly if you have something a bit more severe like bipolar disorder. Now, there's a couple different reasons for this. Probably the most readily apparent one is severe depression utterly destroys the pain pleasure centers in your brain. That's to a large extent what kind of motivates us on kind of a micro level throughout the day. Certain things are enjoyable, so you engage in them. Certain things are unenjoyable, so you avoid them. And that doesn't just mean sexual pleasure or other types of physical pleasure. But let's say you like reading. When you read, it's enjoyable. Now, that may be a learned behavior, that may be something natural, it may be kind of a mixture of different things, but you do it because it's enjoyable, so you do that, it relieves tension, etc. Maybe you find video games enjoyable. Maybe you find working on train sets enjoyable. There's all kinds of stuff that you find enjoyable, even if it's down to eating an apple or something for a snack. And one of the kind of the key things when you look at a manual or a test for depression is a core one is I don't take pleasure in things I used to enjoy. And that's really bad. I think people underestimate. It's like, oh, you're just not having fun, life isn't fun, but you need that to kind of motivate and guide your behavior. If you're not being guided by things you want or things you enjoy and things you don't enjoy, then that gets very difficult. One of the things that antidepressants do, particularly things that affect dopamine is the reward chemical. When you do something, like you get something accomplished, you get a surge of pleasure or happiness from it. And boosting dopamine levels makes people more able to accomplish things and makes them want to achieve things more. It kind of gets them going. So when your dopamine gets really low and your pleasure principle, I think is what Freud called it, disappears, there's not really anything to motivate you. There might be some kind of lingering, and I'll go into this in a bit, sense of duty or responsibility or personal moral things, or maybe kind of it's basically up to the rational part of your brain to completely overpower the emotional part of your brain with no chemical aid and no kind of tricks, because sometimes you can kind of trick yourself to do things. You can go, okay, if I do this, I'll buy myself an ice cream, or okay, my job sucks, but at the end of the week I get my paycheck. What your brain has to do then is it has to, like I said, the rational part of your brain has to completely overpower the emotional part of your brain without having any backup. And that's extremely stressful, and it feels very unnatural. Because, as with kind of Pavlov, a lot of how we learn is through what we enjoy, what we don't enjoy. As I said, people have natural inclinations. Some things are like that, some things are learned. Like, over time, you might be able to convince yourself that junk food is bad for you, and you have a negative association with it, and you have a positive association with healthy food. But if you're going through a period of severe depression, that motivation and demotivation won't matter, because nothing really motivates you. So you don't feel that surge of pleasure at making a good choice. But at the same time, you're already depressed, so you don't feel displeasure by making a bad choice. So kind of when all things are equal, the junk food has more calories and sugar in it, and it's difficult for the rational part of your brain to kind of continually overrun it. So this extends beyond just like that. It's maybe you feel good giving money or you feel good helping people, but you once you're kind of depressed, that goes away. You don't feel pleasure from that anymore. You don't feel pleasure being around people, etc. And you could just see like you may just not hang out with people anymore. You may start to have physical problems because it's affecting other areas of your life. I think just take a moment and think about it. How much in your life is determined by your enjoyment and taking pleasure in doing certain things, and how if that goes away, how difficult it is to just will yourself. Like I said, with no aid, the rational part of your brain is literally just clashing against every other part of your psyche. Now, there's always an issue, like, obviously man has a rational soul, and that has to overpower the sense of the other parts of his soul, but normally there's at least a little aid to it. So there's that aspect to that. The other part of that is, like I said, it feels very unnatural. Is your brain's kind of having to go off of memory. It's saying, oh, I like reading, so I'm going to go read. And you don't feel any desire to do that. You don't take any pleasure for it, but your brain is basically saying, no, you need to go do that. You have to consciously force yourself to do that. You have to consciously force yourself to work. It just doesn't come naturally. And that creates an immense amount of stress within you because all of your decisions are not in line with your feelings. And like I said, obviously people often have to override their feelings. They have to kind of work against them, but at the same time there has to be something of a balance. If it turns kind of to a part where all your actions and all your experience is completely out of line with kind of your subconscious, that's when people start to get depersonalization and disorientation. The world starts to kind of feel like a dream. Because kind of another aspect of severe mental illness is it makes you incapable of accurately perceiving reality. Things like paranoia, extremely low self-esteem, self-hatred, thinking other people hate you when they don't, taking just an overly negative perception dramatically affects your personality, the way you view yourself and you view the outside world. So you have this worldview, and once again, the rational part of your brain is fighting against this with no support whatsoever. You don't have that subconscious, because I think to a large extent water finds a level, and we do subconsciously reconcile ourselves to things. Maybe you get in trouble for something and you're punished and it's really bad at the time, but over time your brain kind of reconciles and rationalizes things. That completely breaks down in the case of a lot of mental illness. So you have a state in which, like I said, your thoughts are completely an act of will, and what your brain is telling the rest of your emotional state is so out of line with it. You feel like you're in a dream, you're in a movie, your concentration severely suffers, etc. Because it is just a contrivance. It's a necessary contrivance. I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do, but it causes immense pain and stress because you're having to constantly force this unnatural state on your body. And kind of to a large extent, what drugs try to do is they try to relieve some of the pressure. They're trying to force kind of your emotional state back to kind of more towards the median, so you're not having to constantly deal with this. And that's why they sometimes relax you. They sometimes try to boost dopamine to motivate you, etc. But that's kind of like the first part of it. It's also just a lot of confusion because there's no consistency. It's like, okay, well, yesterday I was all gung-ho, and today I want to just lie in my bed, or I want to blow my brains out. And that switch that often will happen is also very stressful. Stressful, it's kind of hard to explain what I mean by that, but it's very hard on the mind and body. It's going through an experience that greatly damages and wears them both down. And to a certain extent, rest can restore it, but repeated stresses over time does like increasing amounts of damage to kind of your psyche and to even to your personality. So you have that, and if it starts to go on for a really long time, it just gets worse and worse. The disconnect between the rational and emotional and subconscious parts of your brain gets wider and wider and wider, to the point where you actively feel like you're living in a delusion, because just nothing that you should be doing, like making responsible decisions, etc., does not feel like it's coming to you. There's nothing to motivate it. Also, there's nothing you can do to relieve your stress. And that's why a lot of people turn to drugs or pornography or alcohol or something like that as a desperate attempt to relieve some of the continual stress, because normal activities don't relieve it anymore. Sleep doesn't relieve it, taking time off doesn't relieve it, playing video games doesn't, spending time with your family doesn't, listening to music doesn't. None of these things that normal people use to relieve admittedly much lesser amounts of stress have any impact on you. And once again, there's increasing returns on all of these things. So the more stressed you are, the more stressed you get about your stress, and your inability to undergo kind of a normal relaxation, or to kind of allow your brain, because you go for a walk, you play video games, while you're doing that, your brain, like I said, reconciles things. It learns to, it accepts things while you're doing something else. Because you can't do that, the pain of things doesn't diminish over time, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows. And so what you're kind of left with, to put everything together, is everything about the way you are, behave, the values you have, seem like it's a persona. It's a mask. It's a character you're playing. You don't feel any of it. You don't, like. Let me kind of look at some examples for myself. Like, I rationally, logically, by an act of will, believe in my religion. I do. I don't have any particular doubts in it intellectually. Emotionally, it's something completely different, because, like I said, you can't take pleasure from things that you're predisposed towards, which is one of the reasons I find praying so difficult, because it doesn't provide me with any enjoyment. That's not to say praying is supposed to be like, oh, I'm having fun at the weekend, but it's supposed to provide some kind of psychological relief for stress, some kind of alleviation of your depression, but it doesn't. And that, combined with the extremely low self-esteem, makes it very hard to do that. Maybe you have certain high moral ideals. Maybe you talk about the future of your country. You think marriage is a good thing. You think romance is a good thing, etc. But at the same time, you're completely incapable of feeling those feelings yourself. You support them because you see it as the ideal. You see it as a good thing, but it's not something you have an emotional connection to. Things like, I guess, just any variety of moral issues or ethical issues feel completely hypocritical. Not because you do the opposite, but because your personal moral compass is not in that direction anymore. In fact, what it often does is it goes in the opposite direction, where you want to just indulge in bad behavior, like I said, sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, to try to relieve some of your stress, to try to relieve some of the kind of pain on your psyche. And it pulls you in that direction, and it also makes you extremely negative. You're I think Freud called it the distrato, or then there's the Thanos, which I think is similar, but it's either near nor there. Your desire to destroy, your desire for death, overcomes your desire to create, to change, to grow. And so if you have kind of more correct moral ideals, murder is bad, poverty is bad, I need to help other people, I need to try to not be selfish, you're undergoing these experiences subjectively that are the complete opposite of that. Like, when I go into a depressive spiral, I just want to burn everything around me. I want to destroy everything around me. I want to hurt everybody around me. Because that's just the way it changes my worldview so dramatically. And the rational part of my brain says, no, don't do that, Argent. That's wrong. What you're thinking is wrong. And you're telling yourself that this feeling that's so natural and so strong is wrong. And it's like I said, it's this contradiction, this tension within you that causes immense damage to your psyche. So that basically, and once again, if this goes on for an extended period of time, increasingly you feel that you're a fraud. That these things you stand for, be it your religion, be it your relationships with other people, be it your interests even, are just a fraud. They're just you playing a character. You don't feel any connection to them. And part of the problem is there's nothing you can move on to because everything just feels the same. It's not as if you just go one day, oh, I don't like sports anymore, I'm going to focus on books, or, oh, I'm tired of playing video games, I'm going to go learn to play football. It's, okay, this thing I enjoyed, I don't enjoy, but it's not like there's anything to take its place. So it just goes on and on and on and on. And if people notice I've been very depressed lately, to a large extent it's just because I feel like everything I do, the things I say on this channel, the values I advocate are hypocritical because I just don't feel any emotional connection to them. I feel a connection to destruction, to hatred, to wanting to destroy myself and everything around me, but I don't feel a connection to morally good things. And once again, that inherent tension to view yourself, to view kind of your ego as being something bad, creates this disconnect, this tension, this kind of contradiction that's extremely painful and gets worse and worse as time goes on. Now, how do you deal with it? That's a very interesting question. I haven't figured out a way to really truly deal with it myself. All I can really do is distract myself with other things, be it work or just whatever, until it goes away and I have a period of relative normality. But it's something that will just continue on indefinitely. So this was just made for people who have that kind of emotional issue and they can't identify it, they don't know what it is. They probably are listening to this and they're going, yes, that's exactly how I feel. So maybe I've given you some words to think about it a bit better, and maybe to kind of explain it to yourself or explain it to other people better. And just those of you who know somebody suffering from this, maybe you can empathize and understand them a bit better. So I won't say I hope you enjoyed the video because it's not an enjoyable subject, but I hope you found it interesting and enlightening. So that's what I had to say. I'll talk to you guys later.